Alright, welcome back to Ground Zero Salem. As always, I'm your host, Pat, and today we're talking death metal. We're talking new death metal releases, not necessarily all from new bands. I've got a few classic bands that put out what I feel to be pretty good records past year or so. So the end of last year, I started checking out more and more death metal stuff. It was about maybe like late December, January. I got the itch again, started hitting up the usual suspects for distros and labels, Headsplit, Caligari. There's a label and distro that I think is relatively new, maybe the past couple of years, that I'd seen on Instagram called Adirondack Black Mass, that I started ordering stuff from, and just kind of started dipping my toes in what some of the new bands were doing. If you'll remember on my 2023 Best of Black and Death Metal video, if you happen to watch that, feel free to check it out if you like. I mentioned that I hadn't really been into a lot of newer death metal most of the year, and that's true, but at the very end of the year, I started scoping out tons of recent death metal artists. Seems like the flavors are going more towards like 80s death metal in a lot of cases, or like late 80s raw, primal sort of stuff. I know the whole caveman tag has kind of been driven into the ground and kind of cringe at this point, I guess, but a lot of Autopsy inspired stuff, Impetigo influenced stuff. What's kind of nice, it seems like, is that a lot of these bands aren't doing direct worship of either the aforementioned. They're just doing kind of primal stuff. There's a lot of good death grind and gore grind too that I'm going to be talking about that seems to have come out past couple of years. These aren't all 2023 releases either. They're go back to as far as 2020 and 2021, and that's about it. That's the type of death metal I'm going to be talking about. Got a lot of stuff to go through here, so get comfortable, get some popcorn, a little house cleaning before we get started. Want to give a couple of newer channels, smaller channels, some shout outs. Actually, Black Leather Eyes I think has been around for a little bit. Great channel. I haven't really watched a lot of VC style YouTube, shamefully so. I always get caught up in a lot of commentary stuff and stuff like Turkey Tom and, you know, a lot of drama content for whatever reason. As far as my YouTube diet goes, a lot of political content. There's so much trash and awful stuff going on in those spheres right now that I'm kind of getting burnt out on watching stuff like that. So I've kind of been going back to watching people talk about music, which I'm sure is far better for my mental health. But I stumbled across Black Leather Eyes, who I think has commented on my stuff a handful of times, and he's this dude from Northern Ireland. He recently just did like a collection update talking about a lot of doom and memorializing Wayne Kramer from the MC5. I thought it was a great update. I'll leave a link in the comments below. And then Tied Down TV. I've been loving these guys' work. It's just two dudes in a room, two guys from England. I used to be really good with the accent game. I used to be like, oh, they're from Yorkshire, they're from Liverpool. I don't know. I can't tell. I can just hear that they're not from London or the south of England. Sounds like Liverpool or Yorkshire, the Midlands. I don't know. I'm sorry. I don't want to embarrass myself here as a Yank. I'm like, they kind of sound like Lister from Red Dwarf. I don't know. not London, but a couple of British dudes that just talk about hardcore, talk about their 5 hardcore records in different subgenres, and it's awesome. They just have a natural kind of flow. You could tell they're really good buds. They're very knowledgeable. All of their updates are relatively short, so they're a breeze to just kind of watch through. Super engaging. I really like their stuff, so I'll leave a link for them as well. One other thing, been getting tons of great feedback about the last 2 videos, which is great. Lots of recommendations, suggestions. I will gently remind my viewers again, I'm no expert. I don't like to portray myself as an authority on anything, music-wise or otherwise. I just kind of try to share my own experiences and what I've been listening to and how I interpret things. So if you feel like it's supposed to be a comprehensive, this is the absolute necessary stuff to get into for whatever those topics were, metallic hardcore or 90s traditional hardcore, it's not meant to cover everything. It's just what I like. However, I will say that a few people mentioned how important the Florida bands were with metallic hardcore, namely Culture and Morning Again. Both involved Damien Moyle, who also played in as Friends Rust and Bird of Ill Omen, I believe, and a bunch of other bands. Those bands were really important, I feel like, to the development of metallic hardcore, hardcore getting more metallic over the years and influencing bands in Belgium. Somebody mentioned that Culture and Mourning, again, were big influences on the Hate Thousand bands, and that sounds about right to me. So as penance, I'm playing Culture, Born of You in the background. This is on cassette, obviously. Relatively recent reissue, so really good. Damien also played in Ecstasis, who I talked about. It was a record of the year for me, I think in 2022 or 21. It came out on Unspeakable Acts. A really great death metal record. It didn't sound like they were aping anything too much. Definitely inspired by older European death metal from the Netherlands and Germany and Scandinavia, but not really trying to be a particular band. I still recommend that EP. If you can get a hold of it, do so. It's great. All right, so let's start to get into all of this newer death metal that I enjoy. This new school, old school death metal. Oh, that's a mosh. All right. At the top of my pile, literally and figuratively, we've got the Anthropophagous Abuse of a Corpse LP. This isn't their newest. I think they have one more after this. This came out in, I want to say, 2021. No, this is actually their newest. It came out in 2023. Correct myself there. Came out on Headsplit and Night Rhythms. Might have been Headsplit's first foray into vinyl, if I'm guessing right. One of their first, anyway. They've almost exclusively done tapes for quite a while now, the occasional CD, but it's nice to see Disgustor branching out into wax. Bands from Massachusetts. I think there's another Anthropophagous from years before, but you know, what are you gonna do? It's death metal. You're gonna get into name collision here and there. This is fantastic death metal, and it's hard to pin down exactly what to compare it to, which is always a bonus in my book. It's got a certain element of like late 80s thrash kind of branching into death metal feel to it. Some of the riffs are very thrashy, but it's also got like a rotting, decaying sort of vibe as well, and some doom in there. There's like an acoustic intro that I don't hate at the beginning. It's very tasteful. It works really well, and the intro on the B side is very feels like a giallo intro or something like that, like synthy. But yeah, it's really moody. It goes to a lot of different places. It's got great crunching riffs on it. It's equally disgusting, but can be razor sharp as well. It's a really good, really good LP. Love that. And then a nice partner to that is the Sadistic Drive LP, Anthropophagy, which, you know, I believe that was a movie. Anthropophagy or Anthropophagous was a movie from a while back. And I looked up what that word meant and I forgot. I'll put a little I'll clip something in talking about that after this in post. Okay, so yeah, it's a 1980 Italian horror film. I'm not a super deep head with Italian horror movies. I know the heavy hitters, but never heard of this until I started checking out the band. And then Anthropophagy, it just means cannibalism, basically. So there you go. There's your information. Watch me Google stuff. It's fun. But this is a Finnish band. This is awesome. This is weirdly punk-driven death metal. It's not crust or grind, but you can hear some elements of that kind of seeping into it. It's firmly like gross, disgusting caveman kind of death metal with kind of a punk drive to it and kind of a grindcore feel, but it's very, you know, decrepit and rotting too. They are Finnish, and this came out on Blood Harvest. This is their first one, so I think this was also 2021, if I'm right. I know they have a more recent one, but this made big waves when it came out. I mean, just the aesthetic, it feels like a late 80s death metal record, you know, the one color over the black and white pen and ink kind of thing. It's, of course, very seraphic Decay, you know, but very, very, very good, super catchy, relatively basic meat and potatoes death metal with like a good punk kind of undertone. Certainly if you like the Death demos, if you like Repulsion, if you like early Autopsy, Impetigo, not directly like any of those, but could have been on a bill with them back in the day. You know what I mean? Then we got this Tortuary Bone Fortress 5-song tape. This came out on Noxious Ruin, which is one of my favorite new labels. not sure how long they've been around. They might not be brand new, but new to me. All of their layouts are like this. They fold out into this Maltese cross. I've talked about several of their releases before, and I carry a few of their items in my distro if you're interested. Link in the bio. Or description, rather. And this is like a one-man project from Cleveland, Ohio. Again, super barbaric, brutal death metal, and brutal in the literal sense of brutality, not pingy snare and super gurgly vocals brutal. Not brutal with two O's. The riffs are just really crunching, punishing, almost directly harken back to what made SOD riffs so hard. Stormtroopers of Death, that is. And it's just barbaric, straightforward, mean, moshy death metal stuff. If you want some FFOs, I'd say like Baphomet maybe. The Ton demos, Ton from Ohio as well. But really its own thing. It's got a certain kind of like gristly grossness to it that almost kind of is maybe a little bit leaning towards something Finnish in tone. But yeah, just nasty, crushing stuff. And the new... Is it pronounced Dipygus or Dipygus? Somebody enlighten me. I'll say Dipygus. I've been following this band for a while. I like all their earlier releases. They too are clearly like a slimy, gross kind of death metal band, but they're really bringing something new to the table with this LP of theirs. I think it's their second or third. It's self-titled. The tape release came out on Headsplit. It's got this cool slipcase, and then the artwork right there. They are Californian, I think. With this, they're bringing a lot more variation, a lot more atmosphere. There's some Moog, I think, on it. Some kind of synth that's very like weird and creepy, 70s, 80s horror sounding elements on it. They've got some really like looming longer passages, especially the last song, the Autopsy Skunk Ape goes into like a more of almost like a Death Doom kind of thing. But yeah, I mean, this is the best thing that I've heard by them so far. Their earlier releases were a lot more like thick and heavy, and this has a little bit more, I'd say a little bit more spaciousness to it. You can hear a little bit more separation in the instruments. The tone might have lightened up a little bit, but it's replaced it with a lot more like variation and accessible, but not like a selling out kind of thing. They're just kind of making it more of an interesting listening experience for you. Then we've got Dripping Decay with Festering Grotesqueries. I'm so glad I didn't fumble that one. I didn't mouth jazz my way through that one. Festering Grotesqueries. That's like one of those actor exercises that they say over and over again. Unique New York, that kind of thing. But they're from Portland. I love the little smiley face on the pink tape. That again feels very like sort of goofy late 80s underground kind of style. But this is more death grind. Certainly very firmly death metal, but it grind in a lot of the rhythmic approach. Very blasty, also very festering and gross, obviously, thus the name. But lots of catchiness on it. There's kind of like a Swedish sort of grind. General Surgery, who of course were ripping off Carcass, but Nasm, that kind of stuff, but mixed with like gross death metal. Excellent release there. All right, then we've got Calcinado, Autopsy Celestial. This band is from Sweden. Also very death and kind of gore grind leaning. A little bit quicker with the songs. This is a pretty short and to the point release, which I like. Heavy with the blasting, some good trem picking, that kind of stuff. They're not doing, the cartoonish, some would say overdone sort of Carcass thing with the pitch shifted vocals and the high vocals. They're kind of more of like a through the middle kind of growl, which is cool. Has kind of an odd sort of, I don't know if it's just reverb or something like that on the vocals, but it sounds kind of weirdly affected slightly. And all the lyrics appear to be in Spanish, which is cool. They're from Sweden. But yeah, good, catchy, death, gore, grind kind of stuff. We've got Perishing with Ludum next. This is a Costa Rican band. Generally, when I hear Costa Rican bands, I'm pretty impressed. The last one that comes to mind is Blood-Soaked Necrovoid, who I really enjoyed, who are kind of doomy death sort of stuff. as are these guys. But it's not just one tempo kind of stuff. We're not talking funeral doom. They vary the tempos. They do a little bit of the, kind of more barbaric, kind of punk driven, sort of rhythmic approach on it, as well as like plenty of dirge, occasionally fast, very guttural, very heavy, very cavernous, but also catchy and relatively straightforward with the riff styles. Excellent. Katrina's Hateful Reflections. This is a Mexican one-man project. It's like buzzy, possessed, overdriven thrash that becomes sort of a Black Death hybrid because of how just completely venomous and extreme it is. I would point towards Necrovore, Incubus, God, who else? I mean, even early Morbid Angel, Possessed, that kind of stuff. Angel Corpse, early Angel Corpse. If you like that stuff, you'll dig this. It's great. Grotesqueries, another Boston band. I must have been gone for a while because I don't think these guys were around when I still lived there. They're good regardless. This is also, kind of cryptic death metal stuff. Sounds Scandinavian, not specifically like the HM2 Buzzsaw thing either, like maybe taking equal influence from Sweden and Finland. It definitely sounds European. There's some doomy elements in it. There's some pretty good like leads. Great, pretty guttural vocals. That's good. It's enjoyable. It's solid. Then Putred, Repulsi Postmortem. Not too fond of names that are this kind of basic. Putred, like hatred with an R-E-D. But this band is pretty good. It's enjoyable. Also very slimy. This came out on a Macabre End in 2023. This band is from Romania, and the Metal Archive page said Transylvania. There you go. I didn't even know it was a real place. No, I knew it was a real place, but I'd never heard of anyone or anything being from there. Regardless, I felt like this was super generic the first couple times I listened to it, and then as I absorbed it more, I started to really enjoy it. The vocals are extremely guttural, like Rotravor level guttural, but they kind of grow on you, and you can pick out a discernible word here and there, which is always nice. The leads on it are what kind of make it a step above a lot of stuff. Good melodic leads, a nice, very present, loud bass sound, which is kind of unique, to a lot of bands of this ilk. I feel like that's like a direct nod to Autopsy, or at least when Steve DiGiorgio was doing stuff with them. It's a really good piece of like gross, slimy death metal, and it's got a little bit more on the musicianship level. Like I think it's almost on par with that new Dipygus. With you've got this sort of like caveman, slimy, gross, straightforward death metal thing going on, but there's a little like tip of the hat, a little tip of the fedora in there, showing you they've got a little bit more going on. I was really excited to see Into Darkness had a new EP out. They came out with a 7-inch and an EP years and years ago, 5 or 6 years ago, that I loved. It was Death Doom, but with a little something extra, a little added quality, catchiness to it that I felt was just as good as other stuff that was coming out at the time, like Spectral Voice. And I wish that there was more of it, because I think the 7-inch was on the CD, and the CD had 2 more songs or something like that. This is, again, a little bit of a tease, like it's only 4 songs, but it's great. I initially, going into it, thought they completely changed their sound listening to the first song, because it's a faster death metal song. Sounds almost kind of Floridian, like lightly technical, ferocious, really good. And then the rest of this goes into more doomy territory. But not like sub-basement, really, really down-tuned doom, though. Death doom kind of stuff. More like a regal kind of doom that's also death metal. Hard to really put my finger on it. It's just really well written. It's very epic. And I particularly enjoy it because it has space themes. And I'm so tired of spaceman crap in death metal. And the entire, it's a concept album about a lunar probe and it landing. But I don't care. It's awesome. And it's not like they're just trying to rip off Time Ghoul or something like that. It's very much its own thing. Really cool Italian band. I think they expanded from a 3-piece to a 4-piece for this, by the way. You can kind of hear, I think they added a guitarist. You can hear more depth in the sound, if I'm right. Then we got Trenchant with Commando Cult, Austin band, Texas folks involved in this. Jeff Tandy from Birth AD and a bunch of others. I think he's in the newer lineup of Imprecation. These folks know what they're doing. Generally, any project related to Imprecation and those bands is really good. This is blackened death metal, not in the sense of bestial kind of stuff like that. Tone-wise, it reminds me of more kind of melodic Swedish stuff. You could say, I don't know, like Dissection or something like that, but the pace is straight up like warlike death metal, like Bolt Thrower or something like that. Very like crushing mid-pace, like pummeling double bass. It's super good. Very good riffing. Trucido, A Collection of Self-Destruction, another Texas band. Straight up classic style death grind, slightly tuned up snare, not too pingy. Brings to mind Terrorizer, brings to mind Brutal Truth. Seem to not be taking themselves 100% too seriously, which is good, but not goofy fun shit either. Just blistering grindcore death metal stuff. Also from Texas, Laceration, Demise. I was really excited when I found out that a new one by Laceration had come out. I was a couple years late. This came out in 2021. I just picked it up not too long ago, a month or two ago. Came out on Rotted Life, another really good label. The earlier Laceration stuff, I think they go back to 2008, 2009. Their first demo I was super excited to hear because it was a good example of bands honoring the brutal thrash stuff like Demolition Hammer and Sadis and Epidemic, etc. And I like that stuff. They had a couple more releases that were more or less in that vein. This, they're more firmly in a death metal kind of approach. Still having a thrash edge to it, though. I would say the closest analogs maybe Ten Commandments by Malevolent Creation, or Brutality maybe, something along those lines. Definitely growled vocals, but hyper fast, kind of technical thrash riffs. I'd say it's, if you like Skeletal Remains, check this out. I think Skeletal Remains is okay, but I think this is way better. So, peep that. Yeah, Demise. Carcinoid, Encomium to Extinction. This was thrown in as a freebie in my head split order. And I'd seen a lot of people posting this on social media after it came out, and I just, at the time I was listening to other stuff, and I was just kind of like shrugged and was like, yeah, it looks like another whatever, swampy, disgusting kind of death metal release. And it is. I'm just more in the mood for that kind of stuff now. And also, it's pretty well written. It's goddamn good, actually. They're an Australian band. I've been listening to this constantly. It's grown on me more and more. I think it's just because they really balance out slow and fast. There's a lot of dynamics in it as far as tempo and rhythm goes. Pretty freaking guttural in terms of the vocal department. The tone on this, I think, is one of the more impressive things. It is balls heavy while maintaining a certain clarity. It's just the bottom end of it is so beefy and so just disgusting. It's like an elephant sitting on your chest. It's great. In a pretty similar vein, we've got Seeping Protoplasm from Japan. Exhale Extinction. This is also on Head Split. Also like a similar kind of gross bottom heavy. This is a little bit more like stripped down, basic, almost abrasive, like crusty sound to its death metal. Real like hammering, straightforward drumming. Very, very good. I enjoyed that quite a bit. Following up that, another Head Split release. Liquid Rot Gutted. This is an Italian band. This is a 4-song. I think it was originally just a tape, maybe a demo. Really well recorded too, along the lines of the other ones. Barbaric, sort of straightforward, doom-tinged, gross death metal. However, there's a little bit more nuance. Like there's a little bit more taste. There's very like a certain Italian like tastefulness to it that they involve some synths and stuff like that are also very kind of like horror movie inspired that I like. This is a fun one. Decay by Guts. This is a fun band. They're also Finnish. I want to say they're on Morbid Chapter Records and Rotten Tomb Records. This is, again, tonally very similar to the last batch of things I just talked about, but way catchy. There's like parts that repeat. There's like choruses. It's I hate to use the term pop sensibility when I'm talking about brutal guttural death metal, but it's yeah, it's got parts that are memorable and come back to you. You know, you could think if like maybe one of these bands were transported back in time, thrown on Sony Earache, and had Digby Peterson being like, "Right, mate, just do what you do, but make it catchy." Like that's what would come out of it. This band, Guts from Finland. Sorry, that's a terrible British accent. Then we've got a Culst Crepitation of Phlegethon. This involves Justin Stubbs from Father Befouled and many others. He's playing guitars and bass on this recording. This is a lot more labyrinthine and dark and twisting than a lot of the stuff I've been talking about. Not more dark. It's all dark. It's death metal. But this is death metal that has a swarming, suffocating air to it. I'd say there's definitely some incantation and immolation going on with it, like completely monstrous vocals. Really, really overwhelming guttural growls. And it's got this sort of very maze-like song structure stuff going on. I don't think it's really intended to stick in your ribs or be catchy, especially like the last one. It's more about the atmosphere. And I get that, and it's cool. Not really where I'm at right now with my musical enjoyment, but certainly very accomplished, and a lot of people like it. All right, so let's get into some classic bands that have put out new records recently that I think are great, and I've been enjoying. I think are decent, some of them, but definitely some great. Afterbirth, In But Not Of. A lot of people were freaking out over this last year for good reason. I really like it, which is a little bit of a curveball for me, because I usually don't get into anything this proggy or this weird. Afterbirth, if you didn't know, band that's been around forever from Long Island, kind of helped pioneer the super guttural, brutal vocal style. For this one, they've acquired Big Will, formerly of Artificial Brain, and some other bands. Shotgun Facelift, I think is the name of the grind band that he sang for back in the day. He does the Heavy Hole podcast, which is a favorite of mine. Great interviewer, great podcaster, excellent guttural vocalist. And I think Afterbirth, they did a few demos back in the day that are collected on a CD, which I recommend. That's really good. And then I think they were on a long hiatus, and the past decade or so they've been recording again. I need to explore their back catalog and see if their prior releases are as impressive as this one, because this is really, really something. It's got all the trappings of a lot of modern, brutal death metal stuff. It's very well produced. There's tons of blasts and guttural vocals and all that kind of stuff. But they really go into some weird territories that are very spacey, like I said, kind of proggy. But I think it's the combination of the utter brutality and the almost like psychedelic moments that really make it for me. I do like a handful of bands like Dripping from New Jersey that get really weird but are also very brutal, and I think that's whatever part of my lizard brain that appeals to, this record appeals to as well. So I was really impressed by that. And the new Dying Fetus, Make Them Beg for Death. Something in my brain just was like, you know what, pick it up. I never really listened to these guys. I used to see them live constantly when I was in my early 20s. As I'd mentioned before, I was in a band where the drummer was a metal guy and liked them a lot, so I ended up getting dragged out to the Worcester Palladium many times, and I always liked Dying Fetus live. Out of all the bands from that scene at that time that I really stuck with me, at least for a couple of years, before I forgot about them for a while, I only really bought the CD by Skinless and listened to it for whatever reason. Skinless, Dying Fetus, Internal Bleeding I was into, but I was into them before. There was a handful of bands that just played that whole circuit when brutal death metal was blowing up and like crossing over with hardcore, you know. I like this. This is very enjoyable. I feel like most Dying Fetus records are pretty similar, but they are masters of what they do, doing these fast, speedy runs that are ultra tight, that are almost kind of thrash, sort of in a way kind of thrash, but very firmly death metal fast parts, breaking into these chunky kind of slams, you know, and you can tell they like their share of hardcore. They kind of wear that on their sleeves, and it's all very like engaging and fun to listen to. This isn't my favorite thing ever, but it was satisfying. It's a satisfying listen. I just figured, why not? It's never too late to get into Dying Fetus. New Autopsy. It seems like Autopsy puts out a new record constantly, like every year. I get a little bit apathetic when older bands are on a cycle and are kind of knowing what works and just doing it and doing it and doing it. I heard a lot of people say Ashes, Organs, Blood, and Crypts was kind of a step above a lot of the stuff they'd done in a while. And, you know, I like Autopsy, and all Autopsy sounds like Autopsy, but it is impressive. This is a really good record. It's not going to take the place of Mental Funeral for me at any time soon, but it is really good. I feel like there's a little less doominess in this one. There's plenty of, you know, kind of dirgy parts here and there, but this one I think is a little bit more leaning towards their very first record when they had a little bit more fast stuff going on. Excellently produced, of course. All right, another legacy band that I decided to take the plunge and check out their new one. I heard some good things. Was the new Suffocation, Hymns from the Apocrypha. First one without Frank Mullen, so that's something. I know that he had family obligations. He was done with touring and stuff like that, and I think there's something to be said for a lot of like older death metal vocalists and their ability to keep up like that sort of like guttural attack, you know. Despite that, I'm enjoying this. I think the only original member is actually Terrence as well. Souls to Deny was the last Suffocation that I got, and I checked out some of the other ones. Blood Oath I thought was pretty decent. I never bought it, but I listened to it online and stuff. This is good. It maintains that Suffocation formula of like really abrupt tempo changes, heavy shifts, those slams that they invented. You know, speedy parts, all this stuff's in there. It sticks with you pretty well. I think it's a lot catchier than a lot of younger bands are doing. It's decent quality. I mean, it's got that sort of modern production that's not really my thing, but I do appreciate the fact that it is easy to listen to. You know, the separation in the instruments again is nice and all that. But yeah, enjoyable record. Then we've got finally one more. This is not a legacy band, newer band. Sepulchral Rites, Death and Bloody Ritual. All-female South American band doing a really caustic death with maybe a touch of black metal attack. This is an EP. It's only 5 songs. It does sound very like volcanic South American style kind of death metal stuff, but there's a little bit of Scandinavian in there in terms of like the approach to some of the riffs and the riffing, some tremolo picking and that sort of thing. It's got some really good catchy riffs in there. You know, it's very unholy and blasphemous and sulfuric and many other adjectives that I can't think of right now. And that's it. Next update, I'm going to be talking about a similarly huge pile of mostly CDs of reissues from bands that I've dug up over the past couple of months. That some of those are pretty far flung. They go to as far east as Russia and Poland. I like tracking down a lot of like, you know, Beyond the Iron Curtain or thereabouts death metal from the late 80s and 90s because it just sounds so different. The production's so weird. So some of that stuff, just some other gems I've unearthed that's been reissued over the years. So until then, have a good day, evening, weekend, or weekday. GZS out.